The Australian Financial Review.
I was diagnosed with lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood, and the doctor's prognosis was that I only had a 5% chance of survival. The harder you work, you'll get further along. I think putting in the hours, people think that, if I work super long hours, that I'll get somewhere. I don't think that's true.
Hi, I'm Sally Patton, editor of Boss from the Australian Financial Review, and welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success and failure and everything in between. And along the way, we are hoping to get some really great advice from our leaders. My guest today is Paul McGrath, the Chief Executive of YHA Australia. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Sally. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming into our very black studio, I'm afraid.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, Paul, as I said, you're the Chief Executive of YHA Australia, which is a provider of low-cost holiday accommodation aimed at making travel available to as many people as possible. In Australia, you have 19 properties across the major cities and rural and coastal locations. You employ around 360 people and last year recorded a turnover of about $53 million. And I should add that YHA Australia is part of a global organisation that has a network of more than 2,500 places to stay. When you were in your 20s, did you spend a lot of time in backpacker hotels?
Well, to be really honest, Sally, I didn't. When I was in my 20s, I was fortunate enough to work for Qantas. And so I did travel quite a bit, but we didn't have to stay in hostels or low-cost accommodation. We were very fortunate in those days.
So you started at the top end.
I've started at the top end and now I'm actually made my way down to the other end, which is actually a great experience. I keep saying to my staff and to anybody that I come in contact, you can go to a 5-star hotel and engage with nobody, talk to nobody. But if you come and stay with us, then everybody's in the same space and people will talk with you and will share their knowledge and share their experiences. And that social hotel piece I absolutely love.
Okay, great. Now, Paul, we've only got 15 minutes. We won't waste any more time. The clock starts now. And my first question is about your morning routine. What time do you get up? When do you have a cup of coffee? If you do, what happens?
I'm an early riser.
And when you say early, what do you mean?
So I mean 5:15. I'm an avid cyclist, so I'll cycle a couple of 100 Ks a week, but it's not every day that I cycle or that type of thing. So it depends on my mood and how I feel and what I've got on that particular day. One of my favourite things is actually to walk the dog because that gives me time to think and time to reflect on the past couple of days and also time to reflect on the days coming up.
So really when you get up in the morning, you'll do whatever form of exercise your mood takes you. There's no particular routine?
No routine. I'll always ride on the weekends, always ride on Saturdays and Sundays, but there's no routine. One thing that is a routine, I always try and get the first light of sun and try and expose myself to the first light of sun.
And why do you do that?
To reset my circadian rhythm. And I know that if I can get the first light of sun, it actually helps to restore and reconnect yourself and reset your circadian rhythm. So I do that. So whether that's running or cycling or just walking the dog, the sunrise is my happy moment.
So does that mean in summer you're getting up much earlier?
Correct. Yeah, it does.
So does that give you energy or what is it about the circadian rhythm that helps you?
So it sets my day up. I also know that actually your body has a natural clock. So when the sun's up, then your eyes are open, your body then is ready for the day. The same thing with the sun going down. I dim lights, make sure that I've got a kind of a quiet room ready to actually sleep. So it actually starts and finishes my day and my body knows which part of the day it's in.
Interesting. And what about breakfast? Do you do breakfast?
Not really. No, I don't.
So do you exercise every day?
Generally, my day at work starts between 8 and 8:30. Got a dog, got to make sure that my wife gets off to work. So, I don't stress too much about if I can't do exercise. I will find some time during the day, whether it's in the evening or whether I'll skip it that day or whether I'll do double the next day. I used to stress about exercise. I don't stress about exercise anymore.
Right. Okay, interesting. My next question is about your career. Can you describe for me a pivotal moment in your career that, say, took you from one direction to another?
For me, it wasn't a career moment. It was a health moment, which did change my career, but also laid the foundations for my career going forward. So about 21 years ago, I was diagnosed with lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood. And the doctor's prognosis was that I only had a 5% chance of survival.
Really?
So it was pretty daunting. My wife was pregnant with our third child. And so being given a 5% chance to survival, we really had to obviously adapt very quickly. You know, the day I was diagnosed, I went in a hospital. I was supposed to be going away to Bali on a buying trip for the company I was working at that time, and it's one of those things that your life can change within seconds. So not having a great prognosis, I was given advice by a haematology professor which said this battle is a 50-50 battle.
Which is better than a 5%, 95.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. But he was saying that you've got to trust the medicine. That's the 50%. The other 50% is all on you. So you've got to get yourself in the right mindset. You've got to have the right mental attitude. You've got to do everything you can to help yourself. Let the doctors do what they want to do. Gay and my wife, decided very quickly that we would set up a family support network for her and for me because everybody wanted to know, like I was ripped out of work very quickly and everybody wanted to know how I was and she was getting bombarded. So we set up a communication network that allowed her to have space, but also allowed to communicate with our friends and family and colleagues about how I was. And then I was allowed then and had permission just to focus on myself. So that was about mindset, it was about meditation, and then positive around what I was going through every day, whether it was chemo or tests or whatever.
So, yes, do you have a very consciously positive mindset now?
Absolutely, yeah. I've developed a great resilience. So when things do get difficult, then I can compartmentalise very easily and very clearly, and I can put things in boxes, put lids on those and leave those to another day to actually review and open that up. So I've been able to do that very easily, and meditation for me helps me achieve that. It also helps me to be very clear in my thinking and set a positive mindset. And for me, if you ask what got me through to the other side, it was good medicine, it was a strong, good family, and it was my mindset, my positive outlook that I wasn't going to not survive. I was going to see my third child born, who is now 21 and has just graduated as being a nurse.
Wow. So did you have a mantra during your meditation?
Yeah, I did. It was really what really got me into and holding my state of meditation, which is around strength, focus, understanding, acceptance. The strength was that I had to be a strong person to deal with it and be as strong as I could in those situations. Acceptance of the good stuff and the bad stuff. So, people say chemotherapy is bad, it's killing it. It is, but it's good stuff. And I focused and I meditated on that. Focus, because focusing on my health and focusing on myself was super important to get through, and to remain focused means remain positive for me. And understanding is about acceptance of the situation. Like there's often times I would get out of hospital and you'd look around and say, why me? Why? But it just was.
So the mantra wasn't a series of words that you said to yourself over and over again. It was thinking about those 4 topics.
Those 4 topics. In those words. And those words triggered those responses for me.
Actually, what's the core thing that you learnt going through that experience?
When you think you're done, you're never done. And I guess going back to cycling, your body will give up before your mind will. But what happens is that people think, I can't do this, which is the mind saying they can't do this. The body can keep doing it as long as the mind can keep doing it. And that's the same in business. I'd still, I get stressed out. I'm not perfect. I still get stressed. I still get agitated with people. But it's about having that strength of mind and that single-mindedness and that focus will calm me and will get me through situations. So the mind is so strong.
Yeah, wow. Thank you very much for sharing that amazing recovery you've had. Incredible. My next question is about career advice. What is the best piece of career advice you've ever been given?
Well, I think the best piece I was given was a long time ago from one of my bosses that said, don't miss any opportunities. If you were given an opportunity to go and work somewhere else or do a project, always say yes. And I've actually taken that on board, and it's taken me, a few different ways in my career and a few different projects, but I've never said no to an opportunity. And sometimes you approach that with a little bit of trepidation, but I've always found that the experience is super good, really rewarding, maybe not what I expected, but it was actually, well worthwhile.
So just say yes.
Just say yes.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Paul, on that note, we are going to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be right back to open the famous Chatterbox. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Paul McGrath, the Chief Executive of YHA Australia. Now, Paul, in front of you is the Chatterbox. Inside which are about 15 questions. Please have a fish around, pick out some questions, and we'll get going.
Fantastic.
Thank you. What's your pet hate in the office? I love this question.
For me is people being late for meetings and not being on time for meetings when you're in the same space is really something that peeves me. I'm very focused on time management and making sure that I'm not too early, not late, but right on time. And a peeve for me is people being late for meetings.
So do you try and control or really limit the number of meetings you have a week? And if so, to how many?
Sometimes I try and do that. I've got a kind of a framework in my diary that I have time in the morning, I've got time in the middle of the day and time at the end of the day to myself. And then I'm able to then schedule meetings in between that. The other strategy that we adopt is that we only set 50-minute meetings. We're very big, and I've brought into the organisation the third space. So the first space is where you are at the moment. The second space is where you're going to, and we try and create a third space to give yourself time to breathe and to think about something completely different before you go into your next meeting.
So the third space might be a corridor in the office.
Corridor, deep breathing in a chair, closing your eyes for a couple of minutes before your next meeting. And that's what I try and achieve, because you can be talking about, and especially in my business, talking about one particular topic, and then I'll jump to something completely different. I need time in that third space to really reset myself to actually make sure I'm ready for the next meeting and really show up present in the present moment for that next meeting.
Okay, next question. Have a go. What is the most common piece of work advice or life advice that you think is actually BS?
Well, I think in this case, it's probably around the harder you work, you'll get further along. I think putting in the hours, people think that, if I work super long hours, that I'll get somewhere. I don't think that's true.
Why not?
Well, I think it's not true because if you work long hours and you stay later than when the boss is there, sure, you may get extra work done, but I don't think you contribute. I think, our society now and our business environment is about thinking. It's not about quantity, it's about the quality of work. And I stress with my guys that I'd much rather, a 15-minute, 20-minute quality discussion than an hour-long ongoing meeting. So it's about the quality of the information, not the quantity of what we do.
So don't think about spending too much time in the office, but think about the quality of the thinking that you're doing.
100%, yeah. In modern business, it's more about thinking. I hear a lot of executives talk about, I wish I had more time to think. For me, I create time to think, in the mornings by morning ritual. Even if I'm riding or running, I am thinking, sure, concentrating, but I am able to think and able to give myself space to think.
And when you say thinking, do you mean problem solving? Do you mean dreaming up big ideas? What do you mean by thinking?
Yeah, I think there's an element of innovation. But I don't think innovation just comes with this big idea. For me, innovation is you actually have to work on innovation. You have to have a framework to work on innovation. I think it's about thinking about ideas, yes, but also thinking about problems and different ways to approach different situations, Thinking about what, certainly from my point of view, what my guests want, but also thinking about what my people want. I've got a very young workforce. A lot of them are working holiday makers. We have quite a high turnover. So thinking of ways to, how can we engage them more? How can they be more involved in shaping the business? So that's the broad thinking that I do.
Okay, I love that. Have another fish in the box. Thank you. In your experience, what is the best way to get a promotion?
For me, it's that, what I talked about before, that can-do attitude. So never knock back an opportunity. I think that's one way to be, accessible and to be open to different ideas and opportunities. So that's, for me, number one. I think it's also about, yes, doing good work, but again, going back to the quality of the work. Take your time and make sure that the quality is actually there, not the quantity. I'm very big on quality. I'd much rather a one-page report than a 32-page report. One page can tell me, to me, that's very important. Something that my father shared with me is that dress for the next role that you want.
Ah, right.
So, and our business is pretty casual, pretty relaxed. And I tell all my guys this, if you want a role as a property manager, dress like a property manager. That helps you and helps to create gravitas around you and your personality, and you'll be noticed.
And do you think that even works in this day and age where we're perhaps not dressing as formally for work as we once were?
I think it is more so. That way you stand out. Everybody has a casual Friday, but now I think it's every day is casual. And I think if you're very focused and you're very committed to what you want to do and you're committed to your career, then I think you need to dress appropriately so people can see that. Yeah, that's a bit of advice my father gave me.
And that is the end of the Chatterbox section. Thank you very much. I now have one final question for you, and that is, if you weren't the CEO of YHA Australia, what would you be doing?
In my career, I've done a lot of transformation. A lot of the roles that I've done has been around taking something, and strategy is transformation, taking from one place and putting it into another place. So I'd help people do transformation and I'd help them, guide them through that transformational piece, because the learnings that I've had around the impact on people and the impact on business and the way that you approach transformation, I've had a lot of understanding around that.
Are there a couple of key things you need to do to transform something successfully?
Communication. It gets just down to having a really clear vision. If it's complex, breaking it down to be simple messages. One thing I believe in is the power of three. So if there's a complex issue, break it down to just 3 particular topics. And if you look at life, everything comes in threes. For me, when I was diagnosed, it was medicine, it was family, and it was myself, the power of 3. And I approach business the same way, that if it's complex or it's transformation, keep it to 3. It's vision, it's the communication, and it's the execution. So constantly focus on those 3. And I really believe I can actually help organisations step through that transformational piece to get to the other side, especially when things are complicated and confusing and messages aren't getting through. You just got to simplify it down.
Well, I wish you all the best in helping other companies to transform themselves, both for your sake and for their sake.
Thanks, Sally.
Paul, it's been really amazing and unexpected, I must say, to have that discussion with you about your leukemia. And I will really take away with me the mind over matter and that positive thinking and the mantra that you told yourself every day. And I think meditation is also clearly so important to you and should be to everybody. Your pet office hate, don't be late. I'll try and take that on board. I really appreciate your advice about quality over quantity. It's not how much time you spend in the office. The power of 3, I think, is a really good mantra to sort of lead our lives on. And I really like your idea, dress for success, dress for the job that you want in the future and say yes to everything. So, Paul, thank you so much for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with the boss. It's been a delight.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks so much indeed.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and would like to hear more, consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com, and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, and produced by Lap Fan. Our theme is by Alex Gow. Our head of podcast is Lap Fan, and the head of premium content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.